All right, today we're going to break down a really challenging and frankly provocative essay by Sergio DeSoto. Now, the goal here isn't to attack anyone, but to really dig in and understand the author's central argument about the structure of the modern church itself, a structure he argues has a fundamental flaw.
The essay kicks off with this line right here. It's a statement that's designed to make you stop and just go, wait, what? And before you can even react, the author immediately clarifies what he does, and more importantly, what he doesn't mean by that.
And this is the absolute key to the whole thing. DeSoto isn't framing this as a knock on any single person's intelligence or their sincerity. No, he's making a critique of a system, a machine, as he calls it, one that he argues was built by men centuries after the scriptures were even written.
So, to really get what he's saying, we first have to look at the ideal that the author presents. He argues there's this core conflict between God's original design for his people and the religious systems that we see all around us today. Okay, so this slide really breaks down the central metaphor that drives this entire essay. On one side, you've got the machine. Think hierarchy, middleman, institution. But on the other side, you have what he calls the straight line, which DeSoto argues was God's original plan all along, a direct, intimate, relational way of knowing him. The whole argument really hangs on this contrast.
And to back this up, the author points straight to this prophecy from Jeremiah. This verse, he says, points to a time in the future when the need for human teachers, for those middlemen, would become obsolete, because every single person would have this direct access. Now this is where it gets really fascinating. That key word from the Jeremiah quote, know. In Hebrew, it's yada. And this isn't about knowing facts about God like you'd know a history lesson. The author points out it's the same word used to describe the intimate relationship between a husband and a wife. It's a deep, personal kind of knowing that, well, you just can't delegate to a professional.
So, if the original design was a straight line, you got to ask, right? How did we end up with the pyramid structure that's so common today? This next part of the essay traces that historical shift from what he calls a direct relationship to an institutional religion.
The author basically holds this verse up as Exhibit A. This is a direct command from Jesus, or Yeshua, against using religious titles that create a hierarchy. DeSoto argues this isn't just a friendly suggestion. It's a foundational command meant to keep believers on a level playing field, because there's only one true teacher.
And wow, this slide is a perfect example of how just changing one word can flip the entire meaning on its head. The original Greek word diakonos, which was used for leaders in the early community, literally meant servant or table waiter. But over time, as it got translated into the word minister, the meaning completely inverted to suggest an office of authority, the exact opposite of what it originally meant. So this drift, it didn't happen overnight, but it happened pretty fast. The essay lays out this rapid 300-year shift. You start in Acts 2 with the ekklesia, these small, simple communities meeting in homes, but by around 110 AD, you've got Ignatius of Antioch saying that the bishop presides in the place of God. And then, boom, by 325 AD, the Emperor Constantine merges the church with the Roman Empire, and its structure starts looking a whole lot like the top-down hierarchy of the Roman state. Now, to get a handle on the modern problem, DeSoto looks back at the two main religious systems that Jesus himself confronted. He argues the Pharisees were terrified of breaking God's law, so they built this protective fence of man-made rules all around it. The Sadducees, on the other hand, they used religion for political power. They kept the letter of the law but completely gutted its spirit. Two totally different errors, but they both come from the same root problem: replacing God's direct instruction with a human system. And that leads to this really powerful analogy from the essay. The author uses this to argue that while the Pharisees went wrong by adding all these burdensome rules out of fear, the modern church has kind of swung to the opposite extreme, using grace as a cushion that makes disobedience comfortable and takes away the urgency of actually following God's instructions.
Okay, so we've seen the history, but how does this machine, as the essay calls it, keep itself running today? This next section zooms in on the modern-day mechanics that keep the whole system going.
DeSoto makes the argument that the seminary pipeline is basically the factory that produces the gears for the machine. It starts with a sincere person who feels called. They go to seminary, where they're taught a preset theological system. They learn how to make the text fit that system. And then they graduate, not necessarily as an independent student of the Bible, but as a professional who's been trained to perform a specific role that the institution needs. The essay also takes a specific look at Reformed theology, pointing out what it calls a huge contradiction. On one hand, it champions this idea of sola scriptura, that Scripture alone is the final authority. But on the other hand, the author argues, it builds some of the steepest hierarchies in all of Protestantism, with all these governing bodies and confessions that, in practice, can end up having almost as much authority as the Bible itself.
But hang on a second. What if a pastor is just sincere? You know, they mean well, they just don't know any better. The essay tackles this head-on, pointing to passages like Leviticus 5:17. This verse says that a person is still held responsible for breaking a command, even if they did it by accident. The author's point is that the standard is the text itself, not whether or not a person is aware of the standard.
All right, so after all of that heavy critique, the essay really pivots. It moves away from just diagnosing the problem and starts painting a picture of the alternative, what the author argues was the intended model for community this whole time. So instead of that pyramid with a stage, the author uses this idea of a table. It's horizontal, not vertical. There's no performer and audience. Sure, there are elders, but they're recognized for their wisdom and their character, not for an official title. And this is crucial. The money goes to help people, widows, orphans, not to pay for buildings and salaries. This is the model he pulls straight from the book of Acts.
So what's the big takeaway here? What are you supposed to do with all this? Well, the main call to action in the essay is pretty simple. Be a Berean. See, in the book of Acts, the Bereans got a shout out because they didn't just take the Apostle Paul's word for it. No, they went home and examined the scriptures every day to see if what Paul said was true. The invitation here is to do the exact same thing, to sift, to probe, and to check everything against the text for yourself.
The essay wraps up with a section called Salah. It's a Hebrew word from the Psalms that's often interpreted as a call to just pause and reflect on what you just heard. And that's exactly what we're going to do, by looking at the final questions the author leaves us with.
This first question, man, it gets right to the heart of it. It forces you to ask what your community is actually built on. Is it built on an institution and a professional leader, or is it built on the actual relationships between the people?
This one is a really deep thought experiment. It makes you put our modern practices, the stage, the sermon, the whole structure, side by side with what we actually see described in the scriptures and ask, do these things match?
And finally, the essay leaves us right here. This is probably the most personal question of all, because it shifts the focus from critiquing a system out there to looking at our own individual responsibility in here. It's a really provocative end to a provocative essay, and it's designed to make you think hard about that straight line and where you stand on it.